address the mayor, and I'm the director of mayors in Everett, Colorado.
Hi, I'm Madison Rose. I'm the Vice President of Never Again, Colorado, and I would like to welcome you all to the gubernatorial debate. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to all of our candidates for participating in this debate.
We would like to start with each candidate giving a brief 1 minute question.
Just a brief introduction from each candidate.
I'm John Morse, representing Mike Johnston, but the letter really is our introduction.
Bill Hammonds, Chairman and founder of the Unity Party of America. We're now in 37 states. Our website is, and I'm also the Chairman of the Unity Party of Colorado, the Colorado affiliate of the UPA. Websites are billisrunning.com and unitypartycolorado.com. We are the newest political party in the state of Colorado, one of only 6. Became official on June 6th of last year. Unity checkbox is us under voter registration form, and I also happen to be the Unity Party's first candidate for Colorado.
Thank you. Can you hear me? My name is NJ Oliva. I'm here representing Greg Lopez, Republican for Governor of Colorado. Thank you very much for having us tonight. Greg Lopez is a former mayor of Parker, former director of the Small Business Administration at the federal level here for the state. He has also been the president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the president of the Rocky Mountain Diversity Supplier Council. He was on the E470 board. Should I go slow? All right, I don't want to talk too fast. People tell me I do that all the time, so raise your hand if I start blabbing. He's a strong conservative, and I know that tonight that might not float over with the group that we have here today, but I have to tell you that I'm also a friend of Greg, as well as his campaign manager and policy communications person, and so I'm going to do my best to jump over both sides of the fence as myself and as an advocate for him, but I believe he has got a great vision for our state, and so be patient with me, and I thank you very much.
I'm Jared Polis. I'm running for the Democratic nomination, which means if you're unaffiliated or a Democratic voter, you will get a ballot in early June and have the opportunity to cast your ballot proudly for me. I'm running to end decades of underinvestment in our public schools and make sure that every child has access to preschool and kindergarten. If we really care about the education divide and achievement gap based on income and based on race, we need to make sure we invest early in giving every child a strong start. I have a plan to get our state to 100% renewable energy by 2040, and I'm proud to have the support of the Sierra Club. And we'll be an important partner building at the local, the city, and county level to build towards that goal of 100% renewable energy. I've started and ran schools to serve at-risk kids. I've started small businesses, and I've taken on Trump in Washington, and I'm ready to take him on as your next governor for an inclusive vision for our state.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carrie Kennedy, Democratic candidate for governor. As a proud graduate of Manual High School, welcome to my high school. Do we have any bolts in the house? All right. I appreciate you all being here, and I especially want to call out the leaders in this community with the Never Again movement, with the Moms Demand Action movement, for all of you who are advocating for better and stronger gun safety laws in this country. We have all been horrified by the shootings that are occurring with our children as targets. As the mother of 2 teenagers, I want to thank you all for your advocacy. You are changing politics in this country, and we're going to move forward to make sure that we ban the weapons of war that are slaughtering our children. So thank you all so much for being here. There are 3 things I think we need to do here in Colorado. First, we need to make public education our state's #1 priority. It doesn't make any sense that we have the top-ranked economy in the country and our investment in education ranks at the bottom among states. As your governor, I will lead to permanently reform our Tabor Amendment so we can finally fund our schools. We need to keep healthcare accessible and affordable for everyone in our state, which is why I am calling to offer a public health insurance option for everyone. And finally, we need to protect this beautiful state. As our population continues to grow, we need to protect our open space, our public lands, our air quality, our water quality, and be a national leader on the transition to clean, renewable sources of energy. Leadership in the years ahead is coming from the states. It's coming from strong governors. I would appreciate your support in this race.
Scott Helter, Libertarian candidate for governor. We are the only, right now, we are the third party in this nation. We are in all 50 states. And finally, as of the last 2 years, we're actually getting representatives in the state houses across the state elected, which is a big jump for us. We, as a party, are basically believe in limited government, and we also basically believe in social liberty. We're very liberal on social issues and very conservative on fiscal issues. That's just the state of the party. If elected governor, I only have a few goals. One is to increase the water volume in the state river system by 1/3 to 2/3. My other one is to stabilize para and to allow people, if they want, to opt out of Social Security and get a bigger paycheck. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Some of us just came from a debate in Colorado Springs, and I'll tell you one thing, when you sit, the energy's low. So I want to stand and talk to you because there's a few things I'd like you to know about me. I am the Democratic candidate for governor. I am the current lieutenant governor, and for the first time in the history of this state, the chief operating officer. What does that mean? That means the governor made a decision, a conscious decision, because he appointed me to this position, that the state, which is a $30 billion organization with 31,000 employees, needed somebody to lead it and to get things done every day. He had thousands of people he could pick from, and he picked me to do that work. Before that, I was in healthcare running Kaiser Permanente, as you know, a large nonprofit healthcare organization that serves Medicaid, serves Medicare, serves every single person in this community, and even offered free health insurance to people who didn't qualify for those programs. I'm also a mother. I have 3 children, and I was a single mother for almost all of my life, a working single mother who sometimes had to leave kids behind and wonder what was going to happen, who had to drag her kids to the laundromat, 3 of them, to the grocery store. So I know the struggles of working people, and I want to support all of you as we go forward into the next 8 years. One history lesson, and then I'll sit down, or civics lesson. There's a difference, as you know, between the executive branch and the legislative branch in this country and in this state. I'm part of the executive branch. I lead every day. It's really hard to make a transition from another world to this world. I think you know that. Governors more and more have to lead large and complicated organizations, and I think I'm the candidate to do that. Thank you. It's very hard to see the vision.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to begin with the first question of the evening, and that is, what would be your top 3 priorities as governor?
Okay, well, thank you. As I said, my career has mostly been in healthcare, and I think healthcare has to be a top priority. We're all afraid of losing it. It won't be there when we're older. We're afraid because it's unaffordable and we don't know anything about it. And I have fought for years to try to make sure that healthcare is affordable and accessible. And when the President and Congress tried to take away health insurance for millions of people in America, I stood up and pushed back on that. The second is housing. And I've been talking about housing for more than 2 years. As I traveled around the state, I saw housing unaffordable, not just here in Denver, but across the state. We've got to have a strategy that builds housing and transportation together with economic development, or we're going to start losing people to other states, and we're going to just simply leave Colorado. My third priority is education. I'm a product of the public schools, my teacher and my son and my sister are teachers, and I will fight for you for adequate funding for public education.
I think I've listed three of my top projects, so I'll go to a few others. One is to allow students to declare bankruptcy on parts of their student loans to force the universities to lower their costs. The other one is para, which I believe can be swung on to a nonprofit, again, Libertarians on Limited Government. This has already been done in Holland. And the amazing part is when I get up and tell people I can create $1 trillion pension fund, I look like the crazy guy for a while. Until they go and look at the Dutch and Finland and realize that they've already done it. And those are really small countries. We can do $1 trillion pension fund in this state, not only for the people of para, but for all the people if that's what they choose. And if we did it right, we would take over the Social Security payments from the federal government with some money from them, and we would probably double the amount of money that they would get. The thing about government is the more you limit it, the more you take things away from them, so it can be run by the private sector, almost invariably it gets better. If you're scared of the private sector, think about a nonprofit group, because again, almost invariably it can get better. Thank you.
Education's my top priority. We've been cutting school budgets here in Colorado for almost 30 years, ever since the Tabor Amendment passed. Today in our state, half of the school districts have cut back to a 4-day school week. We pay our teachers among the lowest salaries in the country, so teachers can't afford to live here. They can't afford to work here. I grew up, I attended Manual High School. I have 3 brothers and sisters who joined my family through the foster care program. I also have a sister who joined my family through her church. I grew up with brothers and sisters who didn't have the opportunities that I had had until they moved in with our family, and I understand how important the opportunities are that kids get through their public schools. Colorado should have the best public education system in the nation. You will see me lead to deliver that. I'll work to keep healthcare costs down by offering a public health insurance plan. And finally, my third priority is managing and addressing the impacts of growth. We have not adequately prepared for the growth that we have today. And Colorado's population is forecasted to increase another 3, 4, 5 million people. We have to make the investments to protect our beautiful state.
I'm more of a listener than a talker. If you live in my district, you've probably been to my town halls. I might talk for 4 or 5 minutes, and then we spend 2 hours, hearing ideas from you. So I wish that this had more of that in this session. I want to thank the Never Again advocates. I got to meet with the Parkland survivors. The only F grade I'm ever proud of in my life is the F I got from the NRA during my time in Congress, fighting for a gun safety agenda from day one. I'm proud of the progress our state has made, but we have a long way to go. The red flag law, domestic violence, getting weapons of war off of our streets, and I so am inspired by the students who have taken upon themselves to say we deserve safety in our schools. I have a plan for 100% renewable energy by 2040 or sooner. We can't afford to wait on climate. We need to act now. We have a bold plan to do it, and we're going to get it done. Finally, I want to make sure that we can extend health care to every Colorado family. Health care is a human right. And you know what? Every other country in the industrialized world does that in one way, shape, or form. It is an embarrassment we don't, and we pay too much. We need to use a common payer or a single payer to negotiate for better prescription drug rates, cover every Coloradan through a multi-state consortium, or right here with the universal payer here in Colorado. I've supported that for a long time. It ain't going to come from Washington. We need to roll up our sleeves, get it done right here in Colorado.
Greg Lopez and our campaign slogan is, "It's about all of us." And one of the most important aspects about that slogan, that tag, is the fact that when Greg was the administrator for the Small Business Administration here in Colorado, he visited all 64 counties over the course of those 6 years. And the one thing that he wanted to make sure that was clear when he was running for governor was that there was economic opportunity outside of the Denver metro area, outside of Boulder, outside of Colorado Springs, all of the forgotten and shuttered up main streets around this state. He feels that along with that, there has to be a greater emphasis on small business. Over 98% of all the business filings at the Secretary of State's office are small businesses. If I could see a show of hands, how many people have a small business of any size in this room? That's significant, and it's always growing. That is just the way that our economy works in this state. In fact, it is the backbone of our economy. The next thing that he'd like to focus on is education. He realizes there is a huge shortfall in resources that are going to teachers' salaries, incentive programs for teacher retention, resources that go right to the students so they can use them. And we believe that there's a bureaucracy that needs to be analyzed, for a better word, because we think that there's a lot of money being stopped up in the pipes that could otherwise go right down, that would be a benefit to the students, the teachers, and then make the parents proud of what's being done and how that money is being spent.
3 priorities. 1, protect Colorado's economy, protect Colorado's climate, and we'll phrase it this way, protect Colorado's growth. And agree that global warming is going to be the major issue of the 21st century, and Colorado can do its part to fight global warming. I think that we need to replace Colorado's income tax with a carbon emissions tax, with healthy and regular rebates to lower income Coloradans. And also, that all ties in together. We also need to protect Colorado's economy by making our tax structure more sensible. One of the things that we need to reform the property tax system, as I mentioned, also the income tax system. And also, in terms of growth, we need to put the revenues into creating Colorado's infrastructure. In some cases, we don't even have infrastructure to speak of. And improve our infrastructure, keep our infrastructure up to date. Yes, our state is growing by leaps and bounds, but this is no surprise. I myself have moved here many years ago, and the state has been growing. The state's population has been growing for many decades, and it is a tragedy that we have not done more as a state to keep our infrastructure, not even keeping our infrastructure up to speed with the population that we have, but we're not even making any plans to accommodate for the population boom that we know is only going to accelerate in future years. And one of the proposals that I put out there also to improve Colorado's economy is Prosperous Colorado. We can do more to promote the fact that we are at the center of the country and promote Colorado as the best place to do business in the country, if not the world.
So Mike Johnston would agree with every one of those priorities, but he understands the first thing we have to do is fix Tabor, because without any additional resources, we can't pay teachers more. We can't invest more in schools. We can't invest more in roads. Our state is towards the bottom of the tax revenue generating states in the entire country, and yet we're the only state in the country that has to plow roads at 11,000 feet. That costs money, and we don't have it thanks to Tabor. So that has to be our number 1 priority. His number 2 priority is jobs and increasing the income of families. Because again, that's what people really need to be able to do, to have the flexibility to do things they're not currently doing and be able to pay for things they desperately need but literally can't afford. And finally, when you talk about being able to afford things, healthcare and housing are hugely important issues that we have to figure out, as has been mentioned, how to reduce healthcare costs and how to make sure that Colorado stays affordable for every family that's been here for generations, as well as those families that are moving here because it is the greatest place in the country.
Thank you, candidates. So our next question is, how do you plan to address police brutality and violence?
So as it turns out, Mike Johnston and I have spent quite a bit of time talking about this over the years because I'm a former police officer and a former police chief myself. And the number 1 thing that Mike has come up with is that we don't currently have the trust in our criminal justice system when it comes to police officers that actually step over the line. When there's a police-involved shooting, the district attorney in the local area that works with that police department does the investigation. they have a real conflict of interest because they've got to deal with those officers day in and day out. So let's have a statewide kind of agency that's responsible for doing these kinds of investigations, exonerating police officers when they deserve to be exonerated, and holding them accountable when they deserve to be held accountable.
Body cameras. Colorado does not mandate statewide body cameras, and that should be a law that every police department, sheriff's office should have body cameras mandatory, and they should be put in place immediately. And of course, that is a mandate. It should be a funded mandate. We should provide funding for these body cameras. It often, right now, it takes supposedly it takes many years to implement a body camera program for any given department. That should be accelerated. One that will, I think it will prevent instances of police brutality and police misconduct, but also it will help restore trust in our law enforcement and in our criminal justice system. The vast majority of the day-to-day doings of our law enforcement is perfectly within bounds and perfectly professional. And I think body cameras will just document that. And of course, when anyone, police or suspects, what have you, are being observed, everyone tends to behave more appropriately than they might have been.
I have to agree with my two friends on the right. Those are two of the items that we've talked about in the past. Is always on body cam, because I think that there's a principle called the panopticon, which means when you go into a store or you go into a bank and you see that black half dome coming from the ceiling, there may be a camera in there may not be a camera in there, but the fact that you do not know for sure actually drives more positive behavior for those who believe that they are being watched by a camera. So I absolutely believe that our campaign has been talking about always on body cameras, and then more importantly from a human aspect, that's the technology side. The human aspect has got to be community outreach and building a better relationship, just like any of us up here would do with each other, or what you would do in your own neighborhood when you go home. There's just nothing more important in this world than a relationship, and there's nothing more effective to getting something done than partnerships. And that partnership has to take place between law enforcement, and it has to take place between the community. And if that means putting certain officers in certain areas for a certain amount of time so a relationship can be built, then you can really have a friend and just not a rotating car wherever it is that you live. So that's a very important aspect of our view on police brutality, keeping everybody honest and making sure that relationships are built to last.
This isn't an honest discussion unless we talk about race. Communities of color are disproportionate, both the victims of police brutality and the victims of violent crimes. We need to look at all of our laws from that lens, including our drug laws, and address the long tail of discrimination in both sentencing as well as within the legal structure itself. We have to avoid and combat the mentality of blaming the victim and make sure that we empower our communities of color to make sure that we don't have this long tail of disparate sentencing and disparate impact. I support body cameras. I support criminal justice reform. We can't afford to criminalize mental health issues. We have too many people that are simply dealing with mental health issues in our prisons. When I talk to the Jefferson County Sheriff, Boulder County Sheriff, they say a good third of what they're dealing with in our prisons could better be dealt with through preventative and ongoing mental health treatment. We have a long way to go. I have a full platform around civil rights and social equality on my website at polisforcolorado.com. But we have a long way to go till we can end abuses within the police force and in the broader civil society based on race than based on economics.
So police brutality has got to stop. Communities of color have faced discrimination and inherent bias in the criminal justice system for decades, from over-policing to arrests, to sentencing laws, to racial profiling, and the result of that is that we have seen a highly disproportionate impact of policies that hurt communities of color throughout our criminal justice system. I think there are a couple things we can do to help remedy this throughout the state. The first one is community policing, where you have communities that are much more closely and intimately involved in the policies of their safety officers, of their police force. And the second is having co-responders, a mental health professional who is paired up with our police officers, so that as they're out on the street and they're encountering people who are in a mental health crisis, rather than arresting them and sending them off to jail, that you're addressing the underlying issue of why the police have been called to intervene.
If you go on Google and you do a search for strong mayor governments, which is what Denver has, you'll find a list of cities. And then go and search out police brutality, the counties and the cities that have the highest ones. And they are all the same cities. What we have here is a lack of power by the people. And the simplest way to solve this problem is to make the police chief an elected position. Because instead of having his finger up, wondering what's going on with the mayor, he's going to have his finger up, wondering what's on, going with the people. And if you think this is not true, go to any county next to a strong mayor city system that has a large amount of police brutality, where the sheriff is elected, where other people are elected, they almost have none. That's where we want to get it, is down to the almost none part. And I will tell you right now, it sounds a little radical because we've never done this, but it's the simplest solution.
So I'm running for governor, and I don't think anybody else up here is. Now, I want you to like me. I want you to understand my values. And my values are absolutely. Much of what is going on in this state is about a mental health crisis. But the governor doesn't run the police force in any city or county. The governor has something called the Colorado State Patrol. Basically, we're watching cars driving too fast, and we're doing some other things around marijuana. The governor does appoint judges. The governor needs to make sure that the judicial system is fair. The governor does have a bully pulpit and the ability to pull people together. But much of what you've heard on this stage is not in the direct line of control of the governor. My promise to you is not to talk about things that I have no control over, that just sound good, but is to work collaboratively with everyone in the criminal justice system and try to impact what is a tragedy. Because at the end of the day, we do run our prisons, and we know they're overcrowded. They're not places where we're pushing enough people out back into the world and back into jobs, and that is my commitment to you.
Sorry, folks, we have technical difficulties. We're just going to pass this working mic to the rest of the candidates in reverse order.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to let you all know that this next question, you'll get 30 seconds to respond, and then we'll be moving on to our lightning round questions and take questions from the public. So our next question is, how do you plan to improve the safety of children in schools in Colorado that is infringing on the First, Second, and Fourth Amendment rights of Coloradans?
Thank you. I think there's nothing more important than safety in our schools, right? I mean, as a parent, I wouldn't want to be worrying my children in their 30s. I didn't have the worries that parents have today. But we have a powerful tool. It's called peers, right? Because that's who you talk to when you're troubled, when you are suicidal, when you maybe want to hurt other people. And so making sure that we have a culture that allows young people to have permission to feel like they can talk to a teacher, a mental health counselor, I think is really important. And we have a number of those programs, including something called Safe to Tell. The second is our schools, obviously, and our teachers are being asked to do things that teachers weren't asked to do years ago. And part of that is supporting them, giving them mental health support, not making the teachers do it, but having a resource in every school. Safety is number one. I believe in things called red flag laws that many of you know about. It is much more important to get guns away from people who are going to hurt themselves or hurt others.
Would it surprise you to learn that in the 1920s, a man predicted the start of school shootings? You probably knew him. He was William Jennings Bryan. You probably knew him from the Scope trials. That's what he became most famous for. However, after he got grilled by Clarence Darrow, he actually got a chance to respond on his own. And he killed Darrow. Darrow represented Leopold and Loeb. And what he pointed out was their belief system made it possible for them to kill another human being. I tell you right now, when I was growing up, nobody thought of a school shooting. It didn't happen. And suddenly it came upon us, and I think we have to look at our culture and say, what are we doing wrong? I can tell you one of the things, my pet peeves, which is self-esteem training. But the problem is, the people with the highest self-esteem are psychopaths and the people in prison. I prefer if we teach more traditional. Courage, honesty, respect. I think you'll find that will work just as well.
You say the people in prison? Oh, no.
We need to ban military-style assault weapons and all the devices that convert a standard firearm to a military-style weapon of war, like bump stocks and like silencers. We need to pass a red flag law so that people who know someone who is a risk to themselves or somebody else and the authorities can remove their guns. We need to enforce our background checks so that people with criminal histories, people with restraining orders, people with a history of domestic violence cannot get their hands on a weapon and harm our children. We need to make sure that we have counselors in every school. I hear too often around this state of counselors that are working in 4 or 5 different schools with 400 kids in each school. Children need somebody that they can talk to. And oftentimes, we often know that when a student is struggling, if we have a counselor who is available to them. Finally, we need to make the investments in our school infrastructure. I helped develop the program that's rebuilding hundreds of schools around the state where we can swipe keypad students in through one entry and access where somebody can see who's coming and going in and out of that school. That's basic safety.
Let me start by saying that under Governor Polis, we're not going to arm teachers. Having more guns on campus will make things worse. I absolutely support the red flag law, getting weapons of war off of our street, the nexus between domestic violence and gun violence. We need to do more to prevent people with temporary restraining orders from accessing guns. And we also need to broaden the discussion around counselors and mental health. We need to do a better job in our campus environments, making sure that we have early identification and ongoing treatment for kids that are dealing with trauma or have mental health related issues, right? We also need to make sure that we recognize that one of the biggest causes of trauma is poverty in our state and in our country. And that's why we need to do more to help build wealth, to provide affordable housing, to make sure that families have the resources they need to escape the vicious cycle of poverty. I also want to make sure that we have the physical infrastructure in place for safe schools, not just for mass shootings, but for fire, but for other events that can always cause a disaster. We need to think ahead and make sure that we build in both the physical mechanisms and the drills and procedures to safely and promptly evacuate campuses.
I was waiting for my opportunity to be unpopular, and here it is. I am not, and this campaign is not for red flag laws, especially not in the way that we've seen them in this last legislative session. As the questioner had framed it, doesn't violate the First, the Second, or the Fourth Amendment. And that didn't happen with this bill that recently went through the Colorado legislature and was killed. But I believe that there should have been more focus placed on SB 270 which the sponsors of the red flag bill ran to with 6 hours left in session to try to merge SB 270 with HB 1436, just to try to get it off life support and passed. But the other problem with this red flag bill is it was introduced with 10 days left in the session, and it wasn't really paid attention to until 48 hours before session was ended. So if a bill is that important, it needs to be designed carefully, it needs to be assembled carefully, and it needs to be built to last. We don't want to have a victory lap and then have a court 1 year later say, can't have it, sorry. I believe in safety laws, as does Greg, but it has to take constitutional principles into account, otherwise the bill will not pass through the courts, and it won't serve any purpose whatsoever. The other thing that I think that we're very strong about is fortifying our schools. We have to make safer schools. There has to be more resources available to protect the schools at the exterior. We have to use a program. There's a program right now, if I may, real quick, and so sorry, Tay. Senator Gardner just offered a bill up that said...
I'm sorry, but your time is up.
Hold on. I'm sorry, y'all, but I don't care if you disagree with what he said, but at the beginning we said we respect all values, and we will neither do jazz hands or show signs. So we're asking you to respect somebody that came out here to actually be here with us, even if you disagree with their opinions. I'm sorry, but the time is up. We're moving on to the next candidate.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Fortify schools. Okay. It would be very nice if we could ban AR-15s and make other reforms. Would that be an uphill battle? That would be putting it mildly. Two things about the two most recent shootings, mass shootings. One, there are a lot of, not necessarily this shooting from yesterday, but definitely the Parkland shooting in Florida. There are a lot of signs that were completely ignored by the FBI. One of the things we can do, now this of course is a federal issue, but one of the powers that the governor does have is to appoint interim U.S. senators. And for me as governor, one of the litmus tests of a U.S. senator, would you support making a radical reformation of the FBI, possibly doing away with the FBI, and instituting a process, hear me out, instituting, reforming our federal system to where we are proactively, closely monitoring all social media and other forms of expression,
I'm sorry, but your time
signs
is up.
of potential mass shooters.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Polis and Treasurer Kennedy got it right, but Mike and I spent, each of us, 7 years in the state legislature, overlapping 5 of those years. We think when we're talking about something like a red flag law, common sense ought to be able to get through the legislature in 10 days. So he supports that completely, and I also think the other thing he would say if he was here right now is let's keep in mind what the Second Amendment actually means. It was interpreted by Justice Scalia, one of the most conservative justices on the Supreme Court. He said it means you can have a handgun in your home to defend yourself. Nothing more, nothing less. Concealed carry, not covered by the Second Amendment. AR-15s, not covered by the Second Amendment. Red flag laws that we won't pass for some reason, not
I'm sorry, but your time is
in
up.
conflict with the Second Amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So now we will have the lightning round once I pull them up. Excuse me. Full disclosure, no candidate, no campaign received the lightning round questions. Everybody is learning these questions right now in front of you. So these will be by a show of hands. And these are different topics. There's several of them. And then after that, we're going to move to audience questions. If you would like to ask an audience question, please silently get up. And there's a marshal that's right here in a yellow vest. And you'll stand right here and you'll wait for your question to be asked. Please be silent as you do this process. Only a certain amount of questions will be able to get answered. If there are students that have questions, students will have priority because this is the students decide debate. Moving on to the lightning round questions. By a show of hands, how many of you guys would advise the mayor of Denver to end the urban camping ban? How many of you, by a show of hands, would advise the mayor of Denver to stop criminalizing the homeless?
in the urban camping ban. So the urban camping ban criminalizes people in the city and county of Denver for being homeless and sleeping in parks or public spaces. How many of you, by a show of hands, would support or advise the mayor to end the urban camping ban in Denver? Please raise your hand. Thank you. Will you ban assault weapons in the state of Colorado? Please raise your hand. Thank you. Did you agree with the expulsion of former Representative Steve Lebsock? Please raise your hand. Thank you. Did you support the attempt to expel Senator Randy Baumgartner? Please raise your hand.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Do you support the attempted expulsion of current Senator Randy Baumgartner? Please raise your hand. Do you support arming teachers? Please raise your hand. Do you support arming?
I don't think they
understand. Do you support arming teachers? Do you support a ban on bump stocks? Bump stocks. This one should be good. Will you take money from DFER, A+ Colorado, or any education reform entity? If you would, please raise your hand, or if you have, please raise your hand. Did you not hear the question? Okay. Will you take money from DFER, A+ Colorado, or any education reform entity? Okay. Is climate change real? Yes. Raise your hand if you agree. No, if you don't. Okay. Do you support young people getting into politics? Will you work to preserve Colorado's land for future generations? Will you be an ally to the LGBTQIA+ community? Do you support the death penalty? And our final question. Should the Denver Mayor, Michael B. Hancock, be disciplined for his actions regarding sexual harassment towards an officer in a security detail in 2012?
Kennedy changed her mind.
Let's move on to... Can you hear me now? Can you hear me on the stage, candidates? Cool. Are there any students in this line? Are there any student questions before we take adult? Oh, cool. Sorry, I didn't see you. Come on up. Get close to the stage. I can't hear you.
My question is specific. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Cool. My question is specifically for Mr. Jared Polis. Mr. Polis, in 2014, you co-sponsored the Interstate Commerce Reform Act, which would have allowed gun dealers to sell any gun to citizens of any state. In 2016, you did not co-sponsor an assault weapons ban. In 2017, you have not co-sponsored a high-capacity magazine ban. Why did you not co-sponsor these things? Why did you co-sponsor the Interstate Commerce Reform Act? And how do you feel about these actions now?
So that interstate bill is a gun safety bill. It's a Brady campaign bill to try to get all states to have universal background checks. So that's what that bill is. It was supported by, I believe, all of the gun safety organizations. It did two things. It had reciprocity for concealed carry in exchange for getting a universal background check for every state. So that's what that bill was. Again, I have a career F rating with the NRA. I've never voted with them. I've taken on strong gun safety measures from my first day in office. There are dozens of gun safety bills. I don't think there's any member of Congress that sponsors them all. I'm certainly proud to sponsor a number of them. This session I sponsored the assault weapons ban the day it was introduced as an original author. I've sponsored the bump stock as an original author of that bill. I'm very proud of my record standing up against the NRA for gun safety.
Come on down. Like a game show.
My question is for anyone on the stage. I'm here on behalf of my friend, Giselle DeHaro. When she was 6 years old, she lost her dad. he was murdered. And it wasn't an assault rifle, it was a handgun. So I guess my question is, how do you plan on helping victims of families when this tragedy happens? Because banning assault rifles will take off war weapons, but they're still handguns. It's still a constitutional right. Because when this happened to her family, the only people in front of her house was the news media. And so it's just,
Do you want to each have 30 seconds or what?
Yes.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Yeah, so, there are, most victims of gun violence are not the victims in the headlines over the school shootings. And that's why we need to do more about the nexus of domestic abuse and gun violence. We need to make sure that people who choose to own guns do so safely. I think we should encourage people to take some gun safety classes, as well as making sure they store their guns safely. And I think it's very important to make sure that we recognize that it's not just about the issues that are in the headlines. It's about the countless victims of gun violence every day across our country, and making sure we do more to help prevent it and address it.